All right, Sarah, we appreciate it as always. Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv Live. Now, leaders of the G7 nations are meeting in southern Italy this week, with the agenda dominated by plans to leverage $300 billion of frozen Russian assets to help Ukraine's war effort. Now, the group is also expected to discuss the conflict in Gaza and ways to push back against Chinese overcapacity and its effect on Western economies. From Rome, Giles Gibson takes a look at the key issues on the table.
The G7 has spent months trying to work out how it can use frozen Russian assets in the West legally to help Ukraine. They appeared close to a breakthrough at a meeting of finance ministers last month, with the US pushing for loans that would be secured against the future profits of the assets. The final say, though, lies with their bosses flying into southern Italy this week. At the same time as trying to support Ukraine, G7 leaders are nervously watching the ongoing conflict in Gaza. The group was initially united in its support for Israel after the Hamas attacks last year. There are now clear signs that unity is splintering, although the US remains Israel's most significant backer by far.
Italy and France have expressed a strong desire for the war to wind down and be brought to an end. Japan has even expressed a strong push for Israeli government to respect the ICJ decision. So positions are becoming more nuanced, as we have seen it in the past few months, as the situation on the ground and the humanitarian situation becomes dire.
At previous G7 summits, there's been a lot of talk about de-risking economic ties with China, but the new buzzword is overcapacity. The US has hiked tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, and the European Union has opened a series of investigations into state subsidies for EVs, solar panels, and other products.
Overcapacity is a very simple concept. The Chinese are producing way more than their internal market are able to consume. What the G7 countries are stressing is that towards state incentives, the Chinese economy has been able to produce to a certain level, which nowadays it put all the other economy in peril.
Beijing says Western capitals are exaggerating the threat of overcapacity, and while the G7 is not expected to introduce coordinated tariffs or sanctions, their individual trade policies are only getting tougher on China. Over the course of its presidency, Italy has invited guests to join ministerial meetings in glitzy locations like the island of Capri. Pope Francis, once the subject of deepfake images showing him wearing a papal puffer jacket, is joining the leaders in Puglia to discuss the risks of artificial intelligence. Leaders from Africa will also take part, another example of the G7's attempts to push back against the growing influence of China around the world.
We're only just halfway through Italy's G7 presidency, and there are still other lower-level ministerial meetings coming up later this year. But the success of the Meloni government's tenure when it comes to the G7 will largely be judged by what's in a single document, the joint statement at the end of this summit. Giles Gibson, CNA.